In a previous video linked nearby, I gave a demo of my referral and reward program. I recommend checking that out before watching this video. In this video, I'm going to break down every step of how I set up my referral and reward program. Hi, I'm Ryan Schweighart, founder of Whole Hart Impact, where I help organizations do more of what they love and less of what they don't, leveraging HubSpot and Zapier. This video is intended for those building Zaps for their organization or clients. This video is also for people wanting to set up automations in their organization and are considering me as a person to provide those services. There are a number of steps involved in this process. Even if you don't want to replicate the process exactly, there could be some really useful parts of the demo you could take and repurpose. So I recommend staying tuned and watching. I'm going to chapter it out as well so you could see, maybe jump to a spot that's of interest. I'm going to gloss over some of the more basic stuff, such as creating property in HubSpot. So I'm going to try to go pretty fast. If you have any questions about anything in the process, please reach out to me via comment below or my email at the bottom of my website. So let's get started by hopping into our flow chart, which will be the guide for our video. Here we are in our introduction tracker flowchart, process flowchart, kind of that I have internally within my organization. So introduction is just a whole heart introduction. It's intended for a contact to be referring another contact. Now I know some people, would say, well, it's a company that's being referred. It's like, yeah, but there's a person at that company, and so that's the manner in which I've kind of gone to set it up within HubSpot. Is that it's going to be a contact to contact association label that we'll dive into in just a second. But we're going to be using Basecamp, we're going to be using Tremendous, we're going to be using HubSpot, and then Zapier is going to be kind of the glue that brings pretty much everything together. So in that previous video, you saw how someone fills out a HubSpot form, they make a referral that creates a Basecamp project that essentially they can view with a public tracker, with a public link. And so then as things happen on my end within HubSpot, their Basecamp tracker or project is updated real time, so they can essentially refresh the page. They'll also get email notifications that will indicate where their referral is at in the overall process, because ultimately I pay out a reward to those that are become successful, or become clients of mine, or successful referrals. And so they can see the status of where things are at without necessarily needing to ask me. So the first thing we'll do is make sure we have our Basecamp account set up. There's not really anything within Basecamp that we need to do per se. So just having an account is all that's needed to start. Then in Tremendous, we have our reward, payout software. And so basically what we could do is we could go to send a reward via email. We would create a campaign. We can view the existing ones that I have. You get the option to edit any web page or emails that go out. So if I were to edit this email, you can put in personalization tokens that will ultimately pass within Zapier. So again, gonna try to go fairly fast. You have the ability to select which products you want to allow for redemption. Essentially, you could do a physical Visa card, you could do a virtual Visa card, Amazon, and a lot of other places for gift card opportunities, as well as potential charity donations. And so those are some of the options that I have selected. And then, yeah, pretty self-explanatory, straightforward on the Tremendous side, but let me know if you have any questions setting that piece up. One of the main pieces is the association labels within HubSpot, like I mentioned. And so we're going to be focused on contact to contact association label. So in settings, you'll go to objects and contacts, and then the associations tab, select contacts to contacts in your object association, and then create and configure. So as far as the label goes, I have a pair of labels. I've got referrer and referee. So you want to set it up that way. And then I also have a label limit. Many contacts can have the label referee, but only one contact can have the label referrer. So that's the setup that you'll want to mirror. And then in here, you can also find the API details. We will be needing this association ID a little bit later in the process. So yours won't necessarily be 3. It would be something else most likely. So yeah, that's the setup there as far as the association goes. I also have a couple property, number of properties set up within HubSpot to go ahead and capture information and store it and that type of thing. So we have one deal property that's set up for a HubSpot record ID. It's just a single line text. So you'll want to go ahead and set that piece up. And then we also have contact properties set up. We've got a place to store the referee email, referee first name, last name, phone number. The referral type is a drop-down select that we have set up. It's basically just self and other. So you can, this is the key piece, self and other. You can label it whatever you want on the front end. And then we have a Wintroduction public tracker link and a Wintroduction tracker link internal. So the public tracker link is what you're going to be sending to client or to the people that make the referrals. And that's going to be their Basecamp public link that they can refresh. And then the internal link is essentially some information that the URL that you'll take and store. So that way, as things happen in HubSpot, you can use some of the ID information in that link to go ahead and update the progress tracker in Basecamp. I used URL properties for those. You could get away with a single line text, but HubSpot just came out with a URL property. I think all it does really is prepends the HTTPS information at the front of a string. As far as the overall flow, again, go back and watch the video if you want to see it in action. I'm going to dive behind the scenes, so we're not going to necessarily be triggering things per se in this video. But it all starts with someone either landing on the introduction webpage or maybe seeing the CTA call to action CTA banner that's displayed kind of throughout my website. All that's going to do is take them to the introduction web page where they'll click on either whether they want to refer themselves, their organization, or refer another organization, another person. And so there's 2 call to actions on that page that they would click. It would take them to the appropriate form. Then they'll submit the form and they'll come into HubSpot at that point in time. We'll also create the Basecamp project trackers or progress trackers at that point in time as well. Then essentially in HubSpot, what we're going to do is create a lead, and essentially when we move that lead to connected, it's going to go ahead and update the progress tracker. Then we're going to create a deal and associate it to the contact and company in HubSpot. Whenever that occurs and it lands in our case, in my case, the first deal stage, it's going to update the progress tracker. Then when that deal stage goes to basically a closed one, or that deal goes into a closed one stage, and they become a long-term client of mine, then it's going to update the progress tracker, and it's also going to send the reward. Or if things don't work out with the referral and it goes into a closed loss stage, that will update the progress tracker as well, send an email notification each one of these steps. And when it updates the progress tracker, we'll also send an email notification. There's a kind of block down here in the bottom center that as a first name or last name of the referrer or the referee gets updated in HubSpot, it will go talk to Basecamp and update that information so it stays in sync real time. So again, cruising right along, and we've got the CTA banner. You can set that up. The web page, again, things are linked throughout the flowchart to help with troubleshooting or updating any information. It's just very straightforward and convenient to just take a couple extra seconds, grab the URL at the top of, in this case, this page, come back here and highlight this square, and Canva is the whiteboarding software that I'm using. Do a Command K or Control K and paste that link in there. And yeah, it'll just save a lot of time in the future. And so essentially all that's linked here are links to the form for the introductions. And so as far as the forms themselves, I'm using the newer editor. You could get away with using the legacy editor if you want. The first thing we're going to do is collect the referrer's information, the person that's making the referral. So we're going to get their first name, last name, email, phone. These are going to be connected to essentially creating a contact. So this is going to be connected to a contact's first name, and this is going to be connected to a contact last name, so on. Um, this page here is going to be getting information about the person that they're referring. So we're going to ask for their first name, last name, work email, and phone number. And so essentially what's going to occur there is that these are the referee first name, referee last name. These are the properties that were created previously. And so technically these are going to be properties on the referrer's contact record in HubSpot. If someone makes multiple referrals, it's going to kind of overwrite that property, which is perfectly fine. And what we want to have happen, but that's just essentially the way that it's set up, so we can collect this information within HubSpot. Then we're going to be asking for the organization's name, what they do, problems they may be experiencing. None of these are required because they're going to be referring someone else, so they may or may not know exactly the name of the organization, especially what they do or the problems that they're experiencing. So I went ahead and left those as optional fields. And then this piece down here is our referral type. Again, that's collected at a contact level. This isn't necessarily required, but it's kind of useful in leveraging it later on in the Zaps. So that way we don't have to necessarily track a form ID. We have a little bit cleaner property here that says self or other. And the way it's set up, it's a hidden field, so the person that's filling out the form won't ever see this. But anytime a form gets submitted, it will pass, in our case, we have other selected because this is the other introduction form. Again, you can do whatever you want with the customization of the submission message as well as any other automation. But that's it for the form setup. And then if they're referring themselves, we just don't have that middle page where it's asking for the referee information. So it's a little bit more straightforward in this situation. There's two zaps that are basically collecting whether it's a self form or an other form. So I'll hop into those. As far as the trigger step, we're using a new form submission, and we have other introduction selected here. It's going to essentially find the person that submitted the form in HubSpot, searching by email. We're also going to grab their introduction public tracker link and the internal tracker link if there's a value there. And then we're going to get the person that submitted the form, the referrer's contact associations. Now we're going to use an API request here instead of the find association step that's built within Zapier because we need to get the label information. So we're going to use a get step there, and we're going to pass, this URL information, the record ID of the referrer, the person that submitted the form, essentially. And that's essentially it in this situation. So pause the video, do that throughout. If there's any step that you need to spend more time on, by all means, pause the video and get what you need from that step. Then we're going to figure out whether we need to create the tracker in Basecamp if this is the first time they're submitting a referral, or if they've already submitted a referral, we need to find their tracker in Basecamp. So that's all that this pathing is doing. We're essentially pathing to see, one, if there's any contacts associated with that referrer, which technically if they're submitting the form, there are going to be. And so we're going to see if they've submitted any previously. And so yeah, that's all that this pathing is doing. Because we set up the association labels referrer and referee, we can leverage that to say, okay, if our response from the step 3 does not contain referee, that indicates this is the first time they're submitting the form, and we're going to go ahead and create their tracker in Basecamp. If it does contain referee, then they already have a tracker in Basecamp, and we're going to go ahead and find that tracker. So if they don't have a tracker, we're going to create project from template is basically the Basecamp step that we're going to use, and just find where you need to go to create that template. And technically I have like a blank template set up. So let me hop over into Basecamp here is my template in Basecamp. Basically it's name, introductions. Again, this will all be updated automatically. We're basically just having one to do here. And so if I dive into this piece, we've got progress trackers, and that's essentially it. But by just having the one to-do list here, that'll just allow us to leverage the native Zapier step, basically. So you'll select that template that I was just looking at, and then we're going to go ahead and name it the referrers, first name, last name, and HubSpot ID. Because that's ultimately HubSpot ID is what we're going to utilize to find a tracker if they already have one in Basecamp. So that's all that's occurring with these steps. As far as steps 7 and 10, where it's calling a subzap, these are identical. I went ahead and used a subzap. You could also use a webhook step and send information that way. But the subzap, whenever we have that set up, we ask for certain information. And so you'll just map to that information as needed based on what's displayed here. And then the other form is essentially the same. This gives us the self introduction form. So here we are where someone would submit a new form submission. We're looking for the self introduction. We're going to find that contact by email, and we're going to also get the introduction tracker links. So we got the public tracker link that we're going to retrieve. And then here we're going to do it a little bit differently because it's a self introduction, there's not going to be any other contact associations technically. And so we're going to check if they're already, if they already have a tracker based on the create date. So we're going to add 20 seconds to the create date, and we're going to basically path based on if the 20-second addition after the create date is after the current time, then that means that they do not have a tracker and that we need to create a tracker in Basecamp for them. If the current time is after our 20-second addition, then they already have a tracker in Basecamp essentially. And so we are going to go ahead and find that project. Same setup as the others app as far as creating and finding a project in Basecamp, and the same call subzap steps here. The only thing to kind of keep in mind, this referral type, we're using self, went ahead and manually passed that, but we could leverage the hidden step, the hidden property that we had in the form if we wanted to in that situation. So that's the Zap setup, and then we've got a subzap here. The subzap just allows us to only need to maintain, one set of steps, whereas, this is basically an identical process, whether they, submitted somebody else as a referral or submitted themselves. So by having this as one Zap, if any updates or changes are needed, we only have to do it in this one spot, not two different locations. So whenever you're creating a subzap, you can, input whatever fields you need to collect from the others apps. So we've got our introduction public tracker public link, the referral type, organization name, Basecamp project ID, referrer HubSpot ID, referrer first name, referrer last name, Basecamp project doc IDs, referee email, referee first name, referee last name, referee phone. Basically, the doc ID is each one of these has a. I'll hop into a live tracker. By live tracker, one that we demoed in the other video. And so um, when looking at this, this is a project, and then each one of these is kind of a card or a doc on the back end. And so, yeah, that's all that this doc ID is. On the front end, they kind of call them tools. And so, yeah, you'll see doc IDs for each one of these items, even though they're hidden. All we're looking for is the first one in our situation. So the second step, we're going to take the doc IDs and split it and just get the first one. So that's a formatter step within Zapier. And then we're going to create a to-do list. So we've got our Basecamp step, create to-do list. And we're going to go ahead and name it referee first name and last name. Then we're going to create a to-do. And here in this situation, I'm using a variable. So here we've got variables that you can click manage variables and create and edit from there. This allows for just if we change the name of the variable or of the to do and Basecamp, we can go to our variables in Zapier and it'll be a manual update there as well. But we can use that variable throughout. So that way, if we change the first to do or first item in the tracker, we don't have to go through a bunch of other zaps to update. We can just leverage updating one variable, and that will persist throughout where it's utilized in zaps. Then we're going to go ahead and complete the first to do. Our first to do is introduction received. So we're going to do a update to do step, and we're going to map to the previous to do that we just created. We're going to mark it as complete, basically to say, yep, we got your introduction. That was in the form itself. And it kind of shows a little bit of early progress on the progress tracker. So you're not staring at a blank progress tracker per se. Then we're going to go ahead and create the remaining to-dos. We've got a to-do of connected. We've got a to-do of engaged in trial. We've got a to-do of working together long-term. And then we've got a to-do of referral thank you paid. And then we've got a to-do of did not work out. You may or may not want to create the did not work out. You could probably forego creating it here. And if things truly do not work out, if a deal goes into a close loss stage in my situation, then you could do kind of the create the did not work out to do and do your housekeeping that way. Then we're going to find or create the referee. So if you remember whenever a referrer submits the form, they're going to get the referee information tied or put on their contact record, but we need to create that contact in HubSpot. So that's what's going to happen here in this step. It's going to find that contact if it's in HubSpot via email. If it's not in HubSpot, then it's going to go ahead and create that contact on the same step. As far as what we filled out, that's, yeah, you fill out whatever information. Yeah, selected the wrong one. So whenever it's creating, if it doesn't find it, it's going to fill in the referee email, referee last name, referee first name, referee phone number. And then it's going to, the next step is update the referee contact with the tracker link. So the contact that we just found or created in the previous step, we are going to basically just update their internal tracker link. So this is from step 3 in our situation, the to-do list that was created. So we'll pass that app URL there. Then we're going to create the association for the referrer to the referee at this point in time. Again, because we want to specify the label. We can't use the create association step per se. We're going ahead and utilizing the API request. So this will be a put method. Go ahead and pause the video for the URL syntax here. Basically, we have the referrer that's being associated to the referee. Go ahead and put in content-type and for application /JSON and the additional request headers. It will bring in your connection from Zapier to HubSpot to authenticate you, so you don't have to put in any sort of access token or anything in the header information. And then this is the body information that you'll want to use. We've got the association category as user_defined, and then we've got the association type ID that we grabbed from whenever we created the association. Remember, in our case, it was 3. Yours will be likely different than 3. Then we're going to see if the organization name was given. And so in the self introduction, I made it required. In the other introduction, it is the organization name does not have to be required. And so if it does exist, it's going to find that company in HubSpot because it will have created it in our situation, and we're just searching by the organization name. Again, all this is happening pretty quick, and so it will find the company. There's a low likelihood that the organization name would have changed in the time that it gets to this step. And then basically it's going to see if the referral type was self, then it's going to go ahead and create the association of the person that made the referral to their organization's name. So in this case, we're just going to use the create association step that's available to us in HubSpot, and go ahead and set it up this way. If they submitted the other introduction form, then we will go ahead and create the association where we will have the referee associated to the contact or to the company, the organization that was submitted in the form. And then we're also, by default, the way that the form is processing the information, the person that submits the form is going to get associated to that organization. But if they're referring someone else, we don't want that to occur. So that's all that's happening here is we're going to go ahead and use the remove association step to essentially disconnect or disassociate the person that made the referral with the company organization name that was submitted. Then you'll need the return from a subzap at the end of any step. Let's go ahead and actually copy this and paste below. So I'll put that there as well. And then in this situation, the other path that we have here is if the Wintroduction public tracker link does not exist in the referrer, so the person that made the referral, if this is their first time, if the public tracker link does not exist, then we're going to go ahead and create a task in HubSpot. So we're using the create engagement step. And as far as the engagement type, it's task. And then I have a little bit of HTML here just for a little bit of cleanliness. So it's going to take me to the progress tracker in Basecamp. Then essentially I'm going to create the public tracker link because there's not really a way to create the public tracker or create the public link in Basecamp via an API or via any sort of Zapier step. So this has to be a manual step, but once you create that first public tracker link, any other referrals will use that same link essentially. And so that's all that's being done here is we've got, go to the piece in Basecamp, create the public create the public link, go ahead and go back to HubSpot, click on the link in the task and paste it in there, save the value there. So that's the first overall kind of big step to go ahead and set up the public tracker, and so on. The next step that we're going to do is whenever the lead stage goes to connected, again, you'll see that in the other video, it's going to go to our private app that is essentially going to be set up to trigger the Zap. So I'll click on that private app. Before I click on the private app, we'll actually want to create our Zap, our next Zap, and we're going to use a webhook step as our trigger. And so we're going to catch a hook as the piece. And then whenever you do that, catch a hook, if you come over into the test portion, it's going to give you a URL. And you're going to want to go ahead and copy that URL because we're going to utilize it whenever we set up the private app. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how we would do it just from scratch. So you can name the app whatever you want. I have mine named Zapier. And then you'll go ahead and come over here to this webhooks piece, and you would paste in that webhook. So I'll just put in a URL so that we can then create a subscription. And we're going to want to create, use the expanded object support, go to lead, and then we will go to property changed, and whenever lead status, or I guess it's stage, lead stage, we'll want to select that and add this required scope, and then you can subscribe. So that's how we want to set up our private app. You would go ahead and create the app that way. And then that handles this private app triggers Zap step. So anytime the HubSpot lead stage is updated, it will technically fire some information, mainly the record ID to, as well as the lead stage to our webhook that we just set up in our other Zap. And so, yeah, it'll receive information. We're only going to continue if the lead stage is connected. And so in this case, my property value there is connected stage ID. Yours may be a little bit different. It may be a number or something. The way to find that information is if we go back to objects, leads, pipelines, and then in our case, you can click on this piece here to find the one associated with connected and then grab that internal ID. So that's all I did here. I copied that and pasted it here. Then we're going to find the contact associated with the lead. So we're going to use a find association step. Type of the object being associated as lead. And then, yeah, just trying to find the contact. Then we're going to get more information about that contact using the record ID. And then we're going to send some information to, again, we kind of, instead of a sub zap, we're using just a separate zap. So like I said, you could use a sub zap if you wanted, or in this case, I went ahead and used a webhook because again, I'm not processing any information after that sub zap does something. And so just sending some information to that other zap via a webhook is good enough for me. The one thing that we're grabbing here is our winter direction tracker link internal. So you'll want to get that piece. And then we're going to send our referee HubSpot ID, the Zap ID, so that you can find in the URL, but you can also just get that here in use data or variables system, and then scroll down to grab the Zap ID. And then we are going to use the introduction reward amount. In our case, we don't really need it in this step, so you don't. Yeah, I guess you technically do. Go ahead and pass 0 in this situation. Payload type is form, and yeah, that should be it. You'll want to put in. So I'll show that piece again. You'll need to create the Zap prior to completing that step because you'll need to pass the URL, the webhook URL in this piece. So at the top of this, it's got the webhook URL. You'll want to paste that in based on this Zap that you set up. So you'll use a catch hook trigger here, and then in the test step, you'll get the URL that you'll copy and paste back into the other step. Similar idea here with a sub Zap, or in this case, we're just using a separate Zap that's triggered by a webhook. We have, if you'll see in the overall tracker, a number of things that basically whenever something gets triggered in the overall process, we're going to process some of that information, but we're going to do a majority of the work in this Zap up here, and that's essentially what's displayed here. So I'm actually going to come back to this at the very end, and I'm just going to show you some of the other ones that we have set up. So set this one up first before setting up even this one per se, so that way you can finish out this webhook step. So we've got our connected lead piece set up, and then the next piece is going ahead and creating a deal, associating it to the contact and company in HubSpot. Whenever we create a deal, basically we have a little HubSpot workflow here that is whenever the number of associated deals is known, basically. But then we're also checking to make sure that the number of associated deals is greater than 0. And we're also going to check to see that the contact with label referrer is paired with referee, that situation is set up. Essentially, we're just looking for a record ID that's known. So yeah, this is a contact piece. And just to show how to get to that, basically this bottom piece, everything else should be pretty self-explanatory, but this bottom piece, if you've never done it before, you basically it's going to default to kind of the contact current object that's enrolled in the workflow. But if you click on that drop down, you can come down here to associated object, contact to contact association. Again, we just had a record ID here, so we'll select that. And then there's one more piece. Right now it's any contact, but really we're looking for contact with label referrer paired with referee. So we'll go ahead and select this option. And here we would need to say is known. So that's essentially, I just recreated this piece here. We'll delete that branch, click done. Everything else should be fairly self-explanatory. And as far as what we're doing, we're setting the referee HubSpot record ID to, in our case, the record ID of the enrolled contact. So, yep, that's all that's occurring in that situation. Back into our progress tracker, we'll go through these pretty quick. In this situation, we're looking for deal property change, specifically the referee HubSpot record ID. So whenever that workflow that we just saw occurs, it's going to then trigger this Zap to run because it'll update the referee HubSpot record ID. We're only going to continue if the deal stage is intensive or qualified to buy. Very similar to how we looked for the lead pipeline stage, you do the same thing for the deal stage to get that internal value. This is my trial stage type of thing, and so that's all that we're looking for here. Then we're going to send information to our other Zap that everything's kind of pointed to. Referee HubSpot ID, Zap ID, introduction reward amount is 0. Then we have if someone becomes a long-term client, that's basically what the implementation step here is. So we'll take a look at that Zap. Again, very straightforward. Updated deal stage to implementation. So updated deal stage is a trigger. And then we have the implementation deal stage piece here. And then we're going to grab the introduction reward amount and referee HubSpot record ID. Something to point out real quick within HubSpot if we come over into our deals settings, and then in the pipelines piece, we've got our sales pipeline. Here's the implementation where you can get the underlying value. We also have our introduction reward amount. So depending on however much we want to go ahead and send for the reward, that's being done here and set up here, and it's a required property that must be input. And we also have a max setup of 500 on that. So that was one property that I guess I didn't mention from the outset, but we would want the introduction reward amount, and that's just a number value. And I do have a limit of 500 on that property. This trigger step here is every 2 minutes or so that it would pull for that information. So in the grand scheme, it's pretty much instantaneous, but there's a slight delay on this specific trigger. And then we're only going to continue if the referee HubSpot record ID exists in our case, because we already have the filter on the deal stage based on the trigger step that we're utilizing. And then you go ahead and send the webhook information. We got the referee HubSpot ID, the Zap ID, and the introduction reward amount. The last piece is if it doesn't work out, if they go into a closed lost, that Zap is triggered here. Again, this is an updated deal stage. If it goes into closed lost, then it's basically going to say, does a referee HubSpot record ID exist? And send the same information essentially to our other Zap. So let's dive into that. Last Zap here, the bigger one. So this is where we will go ahead and retrieve the information from the webhook steps in the other Zaps. We're going to get the referee contacts tracker link. So we're going to use a get contact step, specifically the introduction tracker link internal. Then we're going to only continue if that tracker link exists. We're going to split the tracker link based on the forward slashes, and we're going to output them all as separate fields. Then we have our Basecamp access token, which is being utilized. If you do want help setting up the access token or anything like that, reach out to me. I can kind of walk you through it a little bit more in depth. But the initial setup, I just used ChatGPT. If you're familiar with the process, it was pretty straightforward, guiding me through essentially the documentation that's on GitHub. And then I also have a separate Zap that's refreshing that token every week, I think it is, but technically it lasts every 2 weeks. And so it'll refresh that token every week. And so I can show you how that's set up. But essentially, once that token does refresh, we're putting it into a Basecamp access token storage by Zapier item. And that's all that's happening here is we're going to go ahead and get that access token. So the refresh is occurring automatically. Whenever this runs, it's just going to grab the latest access token that's in Zapier storage. Then we're going to get the referee to-do list in Basecamp. So in this case, there's not really a step to go ahead and get this information. So we're using a custom webhook get step. And then here's the URL. This is the account ID. And yeah, so just see the information that's mapped here. We've got the URL that we split from step 4. You're going to pass item 6 in this portion and item 8 in this portion, and go about it that way. Send as JSON. The key is JSON. I think all that's automatic. And then you're going to pass the authorization bearer, and then your access token from the previous step. Then you're going to get associations, the referee from referee ID. You're going to get the referrer from the referee ID. So in HubSpot, we all have at the deal stage the referee HubSpot ID. That's essentially what we're going to pass here, the output of that from step 2. And that's all that's in that step. Then we're going to run some JavaScript to prep for the API request. So we have our associated contacts response body from the previous step. And then here is the code. I can paste it in the blog post. If you're viewing this on YouTube, hop over into the linked blog to copy paste that information. And then what we'll do here is we're going to post, we're going to use a post step, a HubSpot API request, a post step, and basically we are going to get more of the referrer information. So we have our structured data from the JavaScript previous step. Essentially all that we're looking for is the email, I believe it is. We're also going to get the contact referrer introduction public tracker link. So we'll grab that information. So yeah, we're just getting the ID in step 9 via the email. So we're using a search step there. And then, yeah, step 10, we're getting the introduction public tracker link. And then this is where we path based on where they're at in the overall process. So if we connected with them, basically our Zap IDs that we passed from the previous Zaps, the webhook sends, that's going to be what we path on basically. So depending on which Zap it came from, it's going to go down the appropriate step. So if it happens on the connected step, we're going to find that connected to do, and we're going to update it by completing it. And we're going to send an email to the referrer. In our case, we're using Gmail. You could use the email by Zapier step, or you could use Outlook if that's where you're sending your emails from. Then I go ahead and send the email to essentially the referrer that we got from step 9, that email. I'm going to go ahead and grab my BCC to log it to HubSpot. Fill out the rest of the information however you want. And then basically the same thing for engage in trial. You're going to find the engage in trial to do in Basecamp. Again, we're leveraging the variables so that way if we change the name engaged in trial to something else, we don't have to update multiple Zaps. We just have to update the variable in Zapier. Then we're going to complete it. Then we're going to send an email. The long-term engagement, there's a couple more steps. We're going to find the to-do of working together long-term. We're going to update the to-do by completing it. Then we're going to find the did not work out to-do in Basecamp. And then we're going to delete that to-do. So we're going to use a webhook delete step. And here's the essentially URL that you would need to put in. Content type, application JSON, authorization, you're going to use bearer and your access token. Then we are going to only continue if the reward amount is greater than 0. And then we're going to send an email to them saying, hey, your reward's there, be expecting the payout. And then we have our Tremendous order. So create order, email reward for Tremendous, select your funding source, the campaign, input the information, and it will send the email that way. If things did not work out, we're going to find the to-do of did not work out. We're going to update it by completing it. And we're going to find the working together long-term to do. We're going to go ahead and find the referral thank you paid. And we're going to go ahead and delete those as well. So similar manner, go ahead and put make a delete request for the working together long term, and for the referral thank you paid, and go ahead and send the email saying that things did not work out, and that type of thing. So that is the main portion of it. The last piece is if a name is updated for either the referrer or the referee, we have our zaps here. So new contact, property change, HubSpot step. And if the first name changes, we're also going to get the introduction public tracker link and the internal link. We're going to split into paths and say, okay, if the internal link exists, then call subzap. If it does not exist, or if the internal tracker link exists, then call a subzap. And then if the public tracker link exists, then call a subzap. Same thing with the last name here. We're just looking for the last name to get updated, and same setup. We're calling the same subzap. And that is essentially this piece here. So if it is a, what did I click on? If it's a referee, then we have this subzap set up. It's going to split the internal introduction tracker URL, get the Basecamp access token from storage, and then we have our update name for referee progress tracker. So we have our URL here, payload type. We're just passing the first name, last name, record ID, and then your authorization bearer, and then the access token. And then if it is a referrer, essentially what we have here is start our subzap, find the project of the referrer. So we've got a find project step, and we're going to be looking with the HubSpot record ID. We're going to get our Basecamp access token. We're going to update the name of the project using a put step. So I didn't mention that in the other one, but this is a put step. And same information there, return from subzap. So that is it. If you stayed with me all the way to the end and have any questions, by all means, reach out. Let me know what you think. If there's any other use cases that you'd like to see or other points of clarification, please let me know by reaching out via email or comments below. My name is Ryan Schweighart. Bye for now.